episodes of Bagman and Bad Choice Road. Something you may notice about the episode as a whole is that it's not just a traditional series finale, but is also a look back from the show and celebrating how much it has achieved. Celebrating how much both shows have achieved. Presenting us with this iconic imagery is certainly fan service, but delivered in an excellent way because these flashbacks contain a lot of substance. This flashback takes place after the opening of Bad Choice Road.
Yeah.
I know this because in the opening of that episode,
I
Saul
will
still has urine
soon.
in his Davison main bottle. Whereas in the
Okay,
opening
good
of
night.
Saul Gone, he comes across a
Good
stock
night.
tank and thus pours the urine away. The writing in this episode is already incredible. Saul and Mike proceed to have a conversation about a hypothetical time machine, and what point in history they would travel to. Mike making his decision with regrets in mind, and Saul making his decision whilst focusing on money.
First thing we do, take $6 million and build a time machine. Where would you go first?
December 8, 2001.
Why?
No. March 17, 1994. Day I took my first bride. You.
May 10, 1860. That's the day Warren Buffett took over at Berkshire Hathaway. I figure, got a million left in building a time machine, so I take my half and just stick it into Berkshire.
That's it, buddy.
What else?
Nothing you change.
The conversation of time machines in relation to regret would be a common theme echoed throughout this episode. In this instance, it has been really interesting to see how these two speak to each other throughout their journey across the desert. They don't have too much of a friendship in Breaking Bad. They kept in contact because they can benefit each other's line of work. But in this context, they have been pushed to the limit. There has been a lot of shock, some mental breakdowns, many tense moments, and even a few surprises. So naturally, it follows they'd be a lot more open in this type of setting. Mike clearly looks back at his days as a cop with a lot of guilt, especially because of the loss of Matty. Better Call Saul has done a superb job of fleshing out his character. The episode 5 is especially excellent at presenting the corrupt criminal world that Mike was involved in back in Philadelphia. Since moving to Albuquerque, he has taken on many jobs from the bad side, but at the end of the day, the world is still the same. Mike is still the same criminal no matter which side he works for, and this conversation is highlighting the regret with the path he chose. The money he is making in the criminal world is all going to his family, which, on one hand, I've heard that one before.
What I do for my family.
Mike just simply enjoys this work. But on the other hand, he has declined money from Gus in the past as he felt guilty about previous incidents leading to the death of an innocent person.
And that good Samaritan?
Hector shot him in the face. We buried a guy out in the desert. Like I said, we cleaned it up.
Mike is often a selfishly motivated criminal, but he does still have a moral compass. He does not believe that anyone outside of the game deserves to die. And although he made a lot of money working for Gus, it is not the most important thing to him. Saul then of course only mentions money, but just like Mike, this series has done a superb job of fleshing out his character. And with this being the 63rd episode, we know at this point that he is much more complicated than the charismatic lawyer to Breaking Bad, and there is a human side to him.
If I had to do it again, I would maybe do something different. I just thought you should know.
Bet you have regrets.
I have regrets.
Even though he won't admit it here, he has many regrets and is motivated by more than just money. Saul has climbed quite far since that point and has made decent money with his career as a lawyer, but despite falling in with a bad crowd, he is not a completely selfish person. There may be part of him that's lost sight of what's important, but buried deep inside there is still a decent man who has what it takes to do something morally good. After the opening scene, we cut to the iconic intro, which has been designed for the latter episodes of the show. With each season, the openings have become progressively more corrupt, with an increasing emphasis on the black and white. A very creative way of slowly showing the series come full circle. So it's only appropriate that we jump back into the black and white world. Except no Cinnabons will be baked this episode, as Miriam has found out the truth about Saul Goodman and the police have been alerted as a result. Saul speeds home, grabs what he needs, and then is on the run. He makes it to an alleyway, but the police cover it from both sides, so he proceeds to climb into the bin. Unfortunately, he does not have time to call for a new dust filter for his Supermax Extract Pressure Pro Model 60 as the police come knocking. Saul is now in custody, and this is rather distressing for him. He clearly missed his mischievous past, but in returning to his roots, he has been caught again. Only this time his previous career as a criminal lawyer makes his situation even more serious. So desperate times calls for desperate measures. No more half measures, Saul. The lawyer Bill Oakley receives a call and is shocked by who it is. However, once he had finally processed what's happening, he does agree to be Saul's advisory counsel. And with that, the prosecutors go through a list of every crime this criminal lawyer has committed, arriving at the conclusion that Saul would need to be sentenced to life plus 190 years, but offer to make a deal that he serves 30 years. But at this moment, Saul is not very present. He then turns and asks the prosecutors if Agent Schrader's widow can enter the room. Now, if you were to tell me before the release of this episode that Marie Schrader would be in the finale of Better Call Saul, I would be rather confused. But much like every character that returned from Breaking Bad, her inclusion in Saul Gone is fantastic. And when you think about it, she is one of the most appropriate characters to be here. Marie is one of few characters from Breaking Bad who is both a victim and is still alive. Having her play a role in this episode is an effective through line between both shows. She was there to see all of the happy moments with her family, and had no clue of the drug empire the Waters were building. In Felina, Skylar and Marie do speak to each other about Walt's return to Albuquerque, but it's fair to assume that ever since Marie found out, there has been a wedge between them and things won't quite be the same as they once were. Her life has been crushed because of Walter White's selfishness. Saul Goodman was a key player in that game, and so Marie's bitterness towards him is very understandable.
Hank and Steve, the good guys, they were shot dead and left in a hole in the desert. And you helped the two-faced, poisonous bastard behind it all.
Now, as always, Saul is up to no good here, and there was a reason he wanted Marie to come into this room.
It sounds... I met your husband a few times. You and I. But so am I. 2 years ago, the man he said his name was He wanted my client to lie under oath. He offered me money. I declined. And he ignored me. One night, as I was leaving my office, I was attacked. 2 men were set over my head. They hogged me. And they threw me out. They pulled the hood off. In front of me. With a gun.
after he was taken out into the desert, he knew full well what he was doing. He's spinning this and pretending that he's yet another victim, and doing so in front of Hank Schrader's widow, who lost so much. This is extremely unsympathetic. In a lot of ways, this scene is the inverse of the scene between Kim and Cheryl in the previous episode. Kim is very sympathetic towards Howard's widow and confesses everything by essentially handing her the script of season 6 of Better Call Saul, fully accepting any consequences that come her way. Hank Schrader and Howard Hamlin's deaths are somewhat similar as well. Neither death was personal, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The deaths themselves feeling rather abrupt with a bullet to the head. Their killers lacked empathy, and their bodies were buried in locations that were unknown, or locations that were unknown for some time. Howard's death was not directly Jimmy or Kim's fault, but as Cheryl points out, the pair actively ruined his life leading up to his death. On top of that, he wouldn't have been at their apartment in the first place if they had simply left him alone. Now it is fair to say that at one stage, Kim was just as bad as Jimmy.
Also, I agree. We are totally different with all that. No more. Let's do it again.
But following Howard's death, she left everything behind, and did not take her share of the Sandpiper money because of what she would associate that money with. Saul, on the other hand, continued his work as a criminal lawyer and continued to get involved with bad people, leading to more deaths that indirectly involved him. The presentation of how these two dealt with these situations is very effective, and is yet another reason why the character writing in this series is impeccable. It is commonly debated amongst fans of the show as to who is worse between Jimmy and Kim. There are many references to point to for how one was a bad influence for the other, but sadly, they were bad for each other. The episode Fun and Games is very explicit about this idea.
We are bad for each other. I have had to fight for you. We are bad for everyone around us. Other people suffer because of us. Apart, we're okay, but together, poison.
They loved each other, but a lot of that love was based on hurting other people, and convincing themselves that their actions were okay because they were in love and having so much fun together. And eventually, Kim came to the realization that this can't continue. The writers have made their points pretty clear, but the best writers do not just make their points and move on. The best writers will analyze this further. Fun and Games may be the last episode in the main Better Call Saul timeline, but there are still some stones left to turn. An obvious question is that if Kim disapproves of Saul and wants him to hand himself in, then why hasn't she done the same? The previous episode, Walter Works, brings up that question.
We should turn the show.
But why don't you do it yourself then? Seeing as how you're the one who's guilty conscience, huh? What stop it?
And in the same episode, this question is answered by having Kim confessing everything on the record and then visiting Cheryl. This is her genuine attempt to make things right. If she was selfishly motivated, she would have continued to keep quiet. After all, there was no physical evidence of any of this. This is all well written and is an excellent use of cause and effect. However, what elevates this is the subtle reflection of Saul and Kim's very different approaches to these similar situations. And it isn't just the situations they approach differently, but rather their lives in general. Kim tried to move on with her life, but clearly there was a lot of guilt that had been stored up over time. Jimmy, in a somewhat similar vein to Walter White, wanted to say screw you to everyone around him and prove he was the best by building his own business, making shitloads of money, and having the success he always desired.
This is a fresh start. This is how I move forward. And I like it.
Sorry. I just can't see it.
It's okay. You will.
What do you think? Pretty great, right?
Yeah, it's, Yep.
It is no coincidence that Fun and Games jumped straight from the breakup to the Saul Goodman we all know from Breaking Bad. This attitude he has towards Kim is even more supported by the fact that he re-entered the game after being frustrated with her on the phone. Although Kim is far from innocent, she at least eventually owned up to everything she did. Saul has twisted events in front of Marie and the lawyers. Although clever, it is a horrible thing to do.
And you think jurors are gonna buy that?
One.
Following that scene, we see ongoing negotiations for the amount of takeaway food and drink, implying that they've been here for a very long time. Saul manages to narrow down his sentence to 7 years. He will get to serve this time at a more ideal location, and he even gets mint chocolate chip ice cream every Friday. So he decides to push it further and tries to sell the Hamlin story to the prosecutors, before discovering that Kim already confessed everything.
Someone like me and your ex are talking on a regular basis. Kim West walked into the house last night. She spilled her guts on the record. Last chance. Do we go to trial? Do we?
Yes, we have a deal.
We then have our second flashback, this time with Walter White and Saul Goodman waiting for their new identities and to be relocated. The conversation between these two will also be about time travel and regrets.
What would you do if you had a time machine?
Time travel. The kind of time travel that you're thinking of is a scientific impossibility. Stay in your lane.
It's just a thought experiment. There's got to be something you'd go back and change if you could.
There are a few occasions in Breaking Bad where you can tell that Saul just wanted to be friends with Walt. All he wants to do here is discuss a fun topic with him, but